I'm Mario Acosta Velez, Vice President of Local Engagement and Corporate Social Responsibility at Verizon. It is an honor to join many business and community leaders at today's State of the District and Region Conference. Congratulations to the DC Chamber of Commerce for your continued success advocating for the business community in the district and for convening this great event this morning. Today, I am pleased to introduce the State of the Business Recovery and Economic Development for Washington, D.C. panel discussion. Washington, D.C.'s comeback is centered around successful businesses, opportunity-rich neighborhoods, and thriving people. Washington, D.C. strives to be the destination of choice for innovators, job creators, and visitors. As we look ahead, our region's business activity may not look and feel the same as it did 4 years ago, but we remain optimistic. A new era of business activity in D.C. is upon us. This panel will explore the state of the business recovery and economic development for Washington, D.C. The panelists for today's discussion include Deputy Mayor Keith Anderson. Keith Anderson is interim Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. Deputy Mayor Anderson previously served as a director of the DC Department of General Services, a government agency with a mission to build, maintain, and sustain the District of Columbia's real estate portfolio, which includes more than 157 million square feet of land and 35.7 million square feet of state-of-the-art facilities. We also have Honorable Kenyon McDuffie, Chair of Committee on Business and Economic Development, an experienced attorney, civil rights advocate, and community leader dedicated to improving the lives of district residents. Kenyon McDuffie was first elected in the 2012 special election to represent Ward 5 on the Council of the District of Columbia. In 2022, district residents in all 8 wards elected him to serve as council at large. As Economic Development Committee Chairman, McDuffie works to ensure that the district's economy continues to grow and that small and local businesses have a fair chance to take part in the district's economic growth. We also have today Yasim Sheikh, Executive Director of the DC Policy Center. As the founding Executive Director of the DC Policy Center and with over 20 years of public policy experience in the District of Columbia, Dr. Sainz is recognized by policymakers, advocates, and the media as a source of reliable, balanced analysis on the district's economic and demography. Yasim's research interests include economic and fiscal policy, urban economic development, housing, and education. Today, we also have Garen Price, President and CEO Downtown DC Business Improvement Districts. Garen Price brings to the Downtown DC BID more than 15 years of experience directing and supporting large-scale youth, workforce, and education programs and initiatives in the government and nonprofit sector. He joined the BID as Director of Public Space Operations in 2018. Previously, he served as Senior Associate for National Community Strategies at the NEAKC Foundation. And we also have as a panelist our leader, Angela Franco, President and CEO of the DC Chamber of Commerce. Her commitment to support and advocate for Chamber's members demonstrate passion and vision to grow the organization. Franco joined the DC Chamber of Commerce during civic unrest and global pandemic and continues to move the organization forward. And as moderator today, we have Alex Orfinger, who is Market President and Publisher of the Washington Business Journal. Alex also served as Executive Vice President for American City Business Journals, which operates 44 local business journals throughout the United States. It has been an honor to introduce this amazing panel this morning, and now I will turn it over to Alex to moderate the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario, and thank you for that kind introduction. I always look forward to moderating this panel each year. It's packed with fantastic information and fantastic panelists. We're in a treacherous time as the city and the region sort of emerges from this pandemic, and we've certainly got a lot to talk about today. I'm going to spend a little bit of time asking questions to the panel, and then we'll open the floor to questions from our audience, time permitting, of course. So just feel free to drop any question you might have into the chat. I want to spend some time up front with a quick round robin of 3 questions that are on everyone's mind right now. We want to focus eventually on on economic development and business recovery, but we've got to tackle these three questions. So my first question is about the federal government shutdown. How will this stunt impact the attempts to revive downtown, both in the short term and in the longer term? Yasham, I'm going to turn to you first.
Thank you. In some ways, the district has been experiencing a federal government shutdown since March 9, 2020. In the past, when we experienced a shutdown, it had tremendous impacts on the city because we were hosting about 200,000 federal workers downtown. Since the beginning of the pandemic, that number has dwindled. We will still see negative impacts, but it's not going to be as bad as it has been in the past.
Councilman McDuffie?
I appreciate Yasim's insights, but I tell you, it's the last thing we need is a government shutdown. We know how the impact of the pandemic and federal workforce working remotely has impacted the city. So it's really the last thing we need. We need the full faith and credit of the federal government to keep working, and to keep contributing to our local economy. Even though it won't be as severe, or people are saying it won't be as severe as the last one. I think it's really important that we not have to realize that impact to the city's finances as a result of a government shutdown, especially a prolonged government shutdown. So,
yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. How does that affect the city's budget in the long term?
Well, it's not that it's affecting the city's budget in the long term. I mean, I think the last partial shutdown cost the city about $50 million in revenue. All right, and so we're going to keep working. Our essential workers are going to keep working. The police is going to keep policing, and so we'll continue to provide certain functions. But the cost to the city as a result of the government shutdown is just not something that we need, frankly, when we're still trying to make sure that we have a comeback as a result of the pandemic and the decisions made at the federal level around whether or not to work in person, to work remotely, and how quickly people are coming back to downtown.
Thank you. We're going to dig into that a little bit later as well. Thank you. How about Deputy Mayor? Anything you want to add to that around the federal government?
Absolutely. I just want to let folks know that even though the federal government may shut down, DC government will remain open. So folks can count on their trash being picked up and government services to continue. However, when the government shuts down, that means, and the District of Columbia shares a lot of land with the federal government, our museums, our parks, and things of that nature. Millions of people come to the city every year to enjoy those spaces, and those will be closed, which will have an economic impact for the city. But the city itself will continue to run.
Yeah. Angela, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to what everybody says, I'm always thinking about a small business community, and it can affect the government contractors in some ways, especially if they have any business with the federal government. So that's something that we need to keep in mind as well.
Okay, let's get to question number 2 here. We recently reported that, and this topic is about crime. The Business Journal recently reported that our local real estate executive, Gary Rappaport, said that he's more concerned today about crime than he is about the issues about return to office. First of all, do you agree with that statement, that crime is a more important issue to deal with than the overall issue of return to office? Or do you disagree? Deputy Mayor, would you want to tackle that first, please?
I think it's twofold. Crime is an issue. No way to sugarcoat that, unfortunately. But when you have more vibrancy downtown, the incidence for crime lessens. Crime is something that we speak to our businesses about every day. We're working very hard to ensure that businesses stay open, feel comfortable operating, and we're addressing some of those needs. But people returning to work means more vibrancy, more people on the street, which reduces the instances of crime. There are two issues that we have to work on simultaneously.
Yeah. Councilman?
Sure, Alex. I think the two are inextricably linked. And I think it's important for us to recognize that our future economic growth and vitality is linked, just really to our ability to address crime and violence in the District of Columbia. I appreciate the mayor's focus. At the council, Councilmember Brooke Pinto, had a hearing on the chief of police this week, and we need to get her confirmed. But the two industries could be linked. When you talk about wanting to have people come back to downtown to work in their offices, you have to ask the question, what kind of experience are they going to get? And if all they're seeing in the headlines are the negative things about violence, then that narrative impacts our ability to attract people, both the folks who work here, the folks who want to live here, and the folks who want to play here, the tourists and others. And so I think the elected officials in the District of Columbia get that, and we are focused like a laser on trying to address crime and violence in the District of Columbia, because we do want workers back downtown. We want to give them an experience that they feel safe when they get here, and we think that that is something that is happening already, but it really isn't making its way through the headlines right now. And so we have to step up both our activity, but also just the policies around crime and violence to ensure that people feel safe in the District of Columbia, both folks who live here and the folks who we want to be here as workers.
Angela, do you have anything you want to add from the business side?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that has been said. I just hear much more and very often this concern is something that is brought up in every meeting, in every committee. So we just have to be very mindful, understanding that this is one of the main topics and considerations that businesses are having.
And Yesham.
Crime takes a tremendous toll on business activity and human lives and basically cities' vibrancy. In some ways, this is one area where the federal government's actions matter in some ways, excuse me, more than the shutdown. As you know, the district's criminal justice system is split between district's own agencies, which is the police department and the corrections department, and the federal government. Prosecution is done by the federal government. The courts are under the federal government. So this is one area just to solve this particular problem. The city has to work very closely with the federal government, which has proven to be difficult in the past.
Great, thank you.
Alex, if I could just really quickly, I think it's important for elected officials in positions like mine to also be mindful of the policies that we're putting in place and things that are maybe in the queue. We have one thing I wanted to raise is, I was recently talking to a bunch of restaurants owners and operators, and they were deeply concerned about the policy that is going to require them to accept cash beginning on October 1st. Now, that's a bill that we introduced and got passed some time ago. It's only now going into effect, and they are really in fear for their workers that they're going to have to accept cash. I understand the reasons why the city put that policy in place, but given where we are today, we have to ask whether or not it's something we should do on October 1st or something perhaps we should push out a little further while we address some of the concerns that the business community has. And people who have to manage that cash when we see all the retail theft and some of the other crimes that are happening in the city right now.
Is it possible to defer that? Today's almost October 1st, right?
Yeah, no, it is, but I wanted to put it out there because I think it's going to be something that my colleagues and I have to confront, whether or not we have to pass a law, whether or not we have to, do something where the executive is mindful about what enforcement actually looks like as it ramps up. I think there are a number of things that might be done in terms of the concerns that are being raised. We have folks who are literally, some businesses locking their doors during business hours in the day because they are fearful of robberies that they've experienced. And so we don't want to necessarily really put that type of narrative out there as if it is dominating what's happening downtown, because it's not. But it is a deep concern of some of our small businesses, and we have to respond to those concerns. We have to pivot as a government the same way that we ask businesses to pivot to be able to respond and come back from the pandemic.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to let our audience know that we've lost Jaron Price for a few minutes because his fire alarm went off in his office. So I'm sure he'll come back as soon as he can. We just want to make sure he stays safe. I'm going to save my third question for a little bit later on about current events because I want to dive into the report, which is I really encourage our audience to take a closer look at, which is packed with very good information. Yesham, I want to start first with you to talk a little bit about the census trends of people. The mayor has set forth a very ambitious goal to bring more residents back to the city in the next few years as part of her comeback policy. Can you give us a little sense of what the census numbers look like right now? What are you seeing, and what does it mean for the city and the economic vitality of the city? And Jaren, welcome back. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question. One of the biggest impacts of the COVID pandemic has been an exodus of population from large, high-cost metro areas, especially employment centers in such metro areas. Unfortunately, the district did not escape that as well. Since 2019, we have lost about 5% of our population. And the group that has really driven population growth in DC in the past, which are folks moving from elsewhere in the country into the district, this was a very positive force on district's population growth. We have now begun experiencing a net loss of through domestic migration. And this has implications for the city's future in terms of our income tax base, our ability to, attract residents, obviously, and also the future growth, because if you're losing families to suburbs or other parts in the country, we're going to be losing babies, school population, and so forth. So we've actually started seeing a little bit of those trends. One thing that has worked in the district's advantage, even though we've been losing population, we've also been losing tax filers. Our income taxes have not really shown an indication of this. Between 2019 and 2021, $3.1 billion of income left the city through out-migration, but the incomes of those residents who've stayed in the city grown even faster. So we still have the ability to retain higher earning residents, and that's a good thing, but that ability has somewhat weakened compared to our past.
Yeah. So I want, Deputy Mayor, I want to just ask you then, how do we turn around this trajectory of losing residents in the city? The mayor obviously has a game plan, but these numbers over the last 2 years have been fairly dramatic. Yeshim, I think you said 5% we've lost.
Right, and as you know, and Andrew, you mentioned the comeback plan, and that focuses on, especially downtown, filling the space, changing the space, bringing the people. And so, with the comeback plan, which is now we're executing. It's not a plan. It's no longer a plan. We're in execution mode. Some of the goals of that plan are to bring 15,000 new residents downtown, to create that vibrancy that we need in our downtown corridor that I liken to some other neighborhoods in the District of Columbia, like NOMA, which has a 1-to-1 ratio of employees and residents. And so with the comeback plan, the housing and downtown plan, we're bringing 15,000 new residents. We're relaxing TOPA requirements to attract investment. And we'll also have a tax abatement that we're very proud to be able to put out in 2024. We're going to promulgate regulations to get a community input on that. And so the other important piece to downtown and bringing our residents back is also attracting businesses, because when we attract business, they hire district residents and create good jobs so that people can stay here in the city. And so we have several tools in our toolbox to attract business as well. With things of the vitality, with grants that will attract businesses, like the Vitality Fund, which is a $10 million incentive program to help companies relocate and expand here in DC. Also, we have something called the Commercial Acquisition Property Fund, which will give businesses up to 25% of their down payment to purchase property here in the city. So we have several tools in our toolbox to, one, increase the amount of housing in our downtown corridor, as well as affordable housing, but more importantly, or as important, to attract business, which will create jobs for residents here in the city.
Jaren, I want to turn to you a little bit. As the CEO of the downtown bid, you're going to play an important role in attracting some of these new residents downtown. Is that what the deputy mayor says? Is that enough tools in the toolbox for you, or what else do you need to make this a reality, to get more people to live downtown?
Yeah, Alex, it's such a great question. It's really a couple of things that go into that. One, you have to make sure that we are changing some of the underutilized spaces so that it can accommodate residents. So that's where thinking about office to residential conversion in a strategic way makes a lot of sense. It was really remarkable seeing how the mayor and the council came together to make sure that the housing and downtown tax abatements were approved last year, and really encouraging how there was really just a level of thoughtfulness and consideration to how do you ensure that the regulations are appropriate to actually make conditions work. Now, granted, the market is moving in the way the market's moving, so that's not the answer to everything. We know every building's not going to be eligible to convert and all of that good stuff, but it's obviously, it also ties to work, and I know there's some thinking about how remote work has changed the way jobs connect to where people live. But I think we have to just really think deeply. What is it about DC that makes people want to be here, and how do we double down on those kinds of investments?
So, Jaron, we've written a few stories about one of the dearth of supermarkets downtown, and maybe you want to break some news today and tell us about the supermarkets that you're trying to attract into the downtown core.
Yeah, I don't know if we're ready to break any news here today, but I see what you did there, Alex. But very, very soon we'll be ready to do that. But you know, this has been something that has been on the radar for quite some time. But really making sure that we have rich amenities in downtown that make it a livable community. And so that's a goal that we're going to continue to double down on and make sure that we are able to meet the needs of future residents and the current residents who are here.
I don't mean to put you on the hot seat, but I'm going to just do it one more time. There's been a lot of talk about this, you know, the conversions to apartments for some of the aging office space. There seems to be a lot more talk than actual action. What's getting in the way of doing more of these conversions? Do you have enough tool? Do we have, and this is really a question for the entire panel, do we have enough tools in the toolbox to make that happen, make it a reality, or is it just going to be something we talk about? You might want to break news here too and tell us about one that we don't know about.
I do think we have some important tools in the toolbox, which is the relaxed TOPA. See, Andrew, the goal here is to attract investment to the city. And so with relaxing TOPA, with the tax abatement, I think that will attract investment to the city, and developers will be more keen on repurposing or reimagining some of these buildings. And we do have a couple conversions that are already underway. I can think of at least two downtown that are already afoot. So I think we do have the right tools in the toolbox, and I look forward to seeing it actually happen.
Thank you. Angela, I think you want to add to this conversation.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I always think that there's a lot of challenges, you know, in terms of conversions, you know, people not going back to work. I always look at DC still as a place where everybody wants to be, because it brings so much to the table, having the federal government here, having the multilateral organizations in downtown. We have all embassies, we have over 1,000 nonprofits. So there's still a lot of richness to the district, and it's more about us having the conversations we're having in terms of what additional amenities we can have. And in the conversations we had is involving all our communities and being inclusive of everybody that is here in the district. I think that this problem of downtown recovery is something that is affecting a lot of the large cities across the country. And I see that in the conversations we had with the CEOs of chambers of commerce across the country. And the district has a lot of advantages on top of other cities. That is that international flair, and, you know, having the federal government and so many other things. And that's something that sometimes we as a city need to look more and look at all the greatnesses that the city has, not undermining that it can be challenging, or we really need to think this through and work together to make it happen.
Okay, thank you.
Alex, if I could.
Councilman McDuffie, please.
Just briefly to build on what Angela was just saying and the others, you know, if you think about it, the greater Washington area boasts more than a $540 billion regional economy, right? I mean, that's more than the economies of 38 states. And so the reality, though, there's only one DC. right? I'm all for regional cooperation, and I think there needs to be more of that when it comes to economic development. We do a good job of that in transportation and environmental policy, not so much when it comes to economic development. But there's only one DC. We have to be the anchor of our region and not the hole in the donut. And so when we think about the tools that we're using, the Office to Residential Conversions is a tool, right? And we need to promote that tool. But we also need to keep building the tools in our toolbox, right? The toolbox should be growing. And the tools that we're using should be growing as well to make sure that we are attracting top employers to the District of Columbia and frankly, just competing at a higher level. So I appreciate the cooperation that's been happening between the council and the mayor and the business community and workers to do some of the things that we've done more recently, some of the tools that we put into our toolkit. But sky's the limit when it comes to our downtown, right? We are the nation's capital. We have what other parts of our region don't, which is a flight to quality, because when you go outside the country, all the international things that Angela was just talking about, people don't know Fairfax County, they don't know Arlington, they don't know Montgomery County, they know Washington, D.C. And so we've got to really leverage that, not rest on our laurels, but leverage that to do more in terms of attracting businesses to the District of Columbia.
Councilman, I'm going to push back on that just a little bit. I'm the biggest fan for the city and for the region. I'm a cheerleader for business, but there's also been the change here of having fewer workers, both federal workers and commercial workers downtown more than 3 days a week has really caused a potential flight of businesses out of the district to closer where people are living.
Sure.
And is that going to again, Yeshim, do you have data that's showing any of the change in where people are actually living and where they're working, and how that's going to play out for us over the next couple of years?
Could I just really quickly before Yeshim adds the data, because I know that's going to be great information, but when I mean fight to quality, I mean, just last night, I was, saw the chairman and a bunch of others at Forest Theater to watch something. I think the name of the play is Something's Moving. It's a meditation on Maynard Jackson, right? It was great. It was a great play. It was lively downtown on 10th Street. We have tourism, hospitality, we have restaurants, we have world-class theater, we have museums, we have the mall, we have the monuments. We have the stuff that everybody wants. Now, sure, the remote work is going to take some people closer to where they live, but they're not going to be working 24 hours a day. They're still going to want to do a lot of other things outside of work. And we are the place where people can come to live, work, play, and study. And that's what I mean.
But that's going to be a very different city than what we're accustomed to in 2019. And it's going to have financial implications.
Agreed.
Yep.
I agree with that, Alex. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So Yeshim, tell us about what that's going to look like and help us sort of tease out what the future looks like, both, go ahead.
The district has always been very strong in attracting professional and business service workers. But what has happened with the pandemic is, even though when you look at information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows this many workers work in the District of Columbia, those numbers are reported by the place of employment and not actually where work takes place. We have researched this at the DC Policy Center to find that a lot of the office-based occupations, workers are increasingly working from home. So while they are reported as employees and as DC, their job activity is taking place elsewhere in the region. And it's not just elsewhere in the inner counties. Most of that job activity has shifted to outer counties. So we've seen this great exodus in jobs that are remotely workable, but we've also seen that the local service economy follows people. So you'll find restaurants, dry cleaners, arts and entertainment venues close to where people live. So even though the district's hospitality, leisure, and art and entertainment sector is very vibrant, as Councilmember MacDuff noted, we've also seen some of that shift outside of the District of Columbia. On business migration, though, it's really important to remember that the district has always been a net exporter of businesses. This hasn't really weakened our entrepreneurial spirit or the number of establishments in the district. So the district is kind of like the great incubator. We're very good at creating new businesses, attracting young businesses, but as they age, they tend to move out of the city. And this is not a pandemic-induced impact. This has always been the case.
Angela, do you want to address any of what Yeshim was just saying, particularly about the sort of the business incubation role that the city and the chamber play?
Yes. So I mean, Jasmine and I talk about this all the time because we especially looked, and every time there's some new legislation that comes out, we look at how that's going to impact the creation of companies or the growth of companies, or some of the incentives that we can put in place so that they can stay here longer. I think the district, because of its location and having the federal government here, having a lot of the international presence, a lot of people tend to start here and then grow small. A lot of the corporations have a presence in the district, and that brings opportunities, procurement opportunities, opportunities with the federal government. And, you know, international companies that want to open here, they look at the district because it's where their home, the embassy is, and is the natural place to start. And that this is a conversation that we had across the board with a lot of the embassies. So there's a trend. I think that we have to do a better job in making sure they stay. Like, for example, the incentive that we had for technology companies that was removed. What had happened is that technology companies have moved out of the city. A lot of the government contractors, you know, the federal government is here, but they move out to Virginia, and it's something that we really need to look and see how we keep them here. In addition, there's a lot of resources for small businesses, and that's very, very helpful when a company is starting, and there's a lot of those resources here in the district. So I just think, I mean, I agree with Justin that we have to start creating incentives for companies to stay here, especially when they're growing, and they're growing into procurement with the federal government and with the and with corporations as well.
Yeah, help our audience
starting to see.
I'm sorry.
Problems.
Now, I want to help our audience understand, Angela, Yeshim, or anyone on the panel, why a small growing technology company, for instance, decides to leave the city. You know, they're workers here. I imagine that they're attracting young, highly skilled workers who are living in the city. Why do they decide to leave the city?
Well, Andrew, I think that trend is starting to turn around. Just recently, we cut the ribbon with Virtru, which is a DC-based cybersecurity firm that is now expanding here in the District of Columbia. And we use one of our tools in the toolbox, the Vitality Fund, to help them expand their business to, they started in a row house, I believe, on Florida Avenue, and now have a 17,000 square foot facility in downtown DC. And they're now bringing 190 jobs to the District of Columbia. So we have to continue to be intentional about helping our businesses here in the city and using the tools that we have to ensure that they not only stay here in the District of Columbia, but expand. So we also have another company, Quadrant Strategies, that is up to receive the Vitality Fund, again, helping them expand to a 33,000 square foot facility. So I think we're starting to see that the district is not only helping to incubate these technology companies, but we're helping them to expand and stay here in the District of Columbia, and more importantly, create jobs.
Councilman McDuffie, do you have anything you want to add as the head of the Committee on Economic Development?
I say ditto. I love to hear our deputy mayor talk about companies that have started here, that have expanded here, and how he has some of the tools that he needs to do that. We want to see more of that, right? And so what we need to be able to do as a city is recognize what works, but also understanding what are we solving for, right? Like what in the District of Columbia, we are the nation's capital, but what are we solving for? We know, we talk about crime, that it's an issue, but why would a company want to come here? There are a host of reasons, I think, that a company would want to start here and grow here, but we need to make sure that that is part of the narrative that we're promoting that we're taking the show on the road. I saw somewhere where it's like a South Korean company or a company I think moved to Fairfax County or something like that, right? I had a neighbor who's a teacher in Virginia stop me just yesterday as I was going to an event and say, hey, no, actually it was a couple of days ago. He was at a quantum technology event in Virginia that I think Connected DC had put on, and he told me, and this is a guy who we speak every now and again when I see him walking his dog, but he thought enough to stop me because he knows I'm the council member, to say there was nobody from DC there. Well, we want to make sure that people from DC are there, so we're telling our story. We're telling our story internationally. We're attracting companies to the District of Columbia who are hiring people who live here because we have one of the most educated workforce of any place in the country. We just need to keep on pushing really the things that are our strengths. And I think Keith is doing a good job when he's talking about those types of companies that are already located here, that are expanding here, that want to stay here, as opposed to some of the things that we've heard more recently that some of these tech companies are leaving. We know that QHTC did benefit some companies. I don't think we did a good enough job explaining the benefits to the District of Columbia as a whole. And I think that's something we have to do a better job of, and making sure that the incentives exist, that our Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, that our DC Chamber of Commerce, that our downtown DC bid needs to do their jobs most effectively, because when they win, we all win. Workers win as well.
Thank you.
Alex, one of the reasons, one of the reasons that young companies might choose to leave DC is if they go public. There's significant benefits to going public in a lower tax environment, and they can simply do so by crossing the river and going into Arlington. That's a real monetary motivation, and that we hear quite often from companies.
Is there anything also, Angela, in terms of the regulatory environment or other environment that is causing some, yes, it's a while before a company is going to go public. So they decide to do that as they're about to go public. But I believe you pointed to some exodus of some not as good an environment that, in the district. And there are some specific steps that you're recommending. Yesham, Angela, do you want to point to any of that? Angela?
Yeah, in terms of legislation?
Yes.
That we wanted I mean, one of the things, I cannot think on anything specific right now, but what I'm going to say is that it's very difficult to keep up with regulations in the district sometimes. And, I think we need to, every time I feel like we are educating our members in something else. So if it is the cash law, or the restaurant association, or any additional tax or fee that is coming up, or any changes. And sometimes it's very difficult to keep businesses informed of a lot of the changes. And it's something that we have been very vocal about. We have talked to the council members about it. So I just think we need to, when we look at the business community long-term, we have to decide together, what kind of business community do we want to have? What kind of businesses do we want to bring? And what environment do we want to create together, and really work on that legislation together? We've been, as part of our report, we were very, as part of our advocacy, we want to have clarity in what's the approach we want to take as a business community all together, so that we can make decisions that is gonna guide the conversation in a clear north and in a clear path. And then I think that we will, be able to, bring additional companies, have more companies like the deputy mayor was sharing about, and really help them grow here in the district. We have a lot of the resources to make that happen.
Thank you. So, Yesham, you titled this year's report, Doing Business Under Fiscal Distress. So I wanted to dive in a little bit to the fiscal condition of the city. I feel like this is I feel like I asked this question a lot, whether we're going to the same rodeo that we went to in 1997 with the with the control board. You cite in the report some rather dramatic projections of commercial valuations, which will then result in lower tax revenue to the city, and some stresses on the city's finances going forward. Can you first share with us what the picture looks like for commercial valuations for starters, and then we'll deal with the fiscal implications later.
Yeah, the district, the commercial property has always been district's workhorse. There are about 670 large office buildings in DC that account for less than 1% of all the property we tax, about a quarter of the value and 40% of tax revenue. And these are the types of buildings that are increasingly under distress. In terms of commercial office valuations, honestly, we just don't have a very good idea of how much commercial office buildings are worth these days. That's because we have not seen any sales. There have been a few distress sales and transfers back to the banks, and just a handful of them in the last year, which show that assessed value declines of over 50%. For example, one building recently that was returned to the bank was assessed at $140 million, but has been recorded at $37 million. So that's
more than 50%.
That's more than 50%. That's a very scary picture. I think every 10% decline in the commercial values lead to about $100 million loss in tax revenue. I don't want to make predictions as to where we will end up because we just don't have the data, but I believe that beginning October, we'll see more of these transactions as the city cuts its de-recordation taxes by half. But I think that's the single most important threat that the city is facing to its revenues right now.
Darren, if I can talk to you a little bit about the downtown, are you seeing any investors coming in to purchase distressed office buildings, or are they still sitting on the sidelines?
Yeah, Alex, that's something we're monitoring really closely. Right now, we haven't observed any major activity, but there are certainly folks who are interested. And I think folks are watching to see when those rates fall low enough, right? And so there's a lot of eyes on what happens and what types of trends will take place. I did just want to say, and this speaks a little bit to some of what we were talking about just now, folks are really thinking about what is going to be the value proposition of some of these commercial office buildings. And as we're thinking about, what are we seeing in terms of office tenants? The downtown story is interesting in that we're not necessarily leading office tenants to the other parts of the region. It's really within DC that we're seeing movement. And again, it speaks to that flight to quality problem. And so I think there's still some question about what is the real true value of some of these buildings, and will we see, some other uses in some of these spaces that could make them more valuable? I want to mention just a bright spot in what we're seeing with Johns Hopkins University, which took over the museum space. If you have not seen that building, it is remarkably done. And it's truly amazing to see, 1,500 students who are being served. It's brought a level of vibrancy and just excitement to a part of the city that was very sleepy for quite some time. And so it's, there's still some power there. And I think that there still could be some potential value that might keep us from completely hitting that rock bottom. But it's something we got to pay attention to and watch closely.
So I think that's a great example, the Johns Hopkins project. We talked a little bit about the conversion issues, but the conversion issues aren't going to solve the problem. There's a lot of space here. So what else are the minds on this call thinking about, which for potential uses of some of these older buildings?
Well, I will say, and these other folks on the panel, feel free to add here. We've been really encouraged to be a part of the Mayor's Downtown Action Plan process. And so in partnership with the Golden Triangle bid and the Federal City Council, we've been spending the better part of the last few months really convening opportunities for various stakeholders to come together and share ideas, asking just that question. One, what is the future of downtown and how can we make that happen through specific targeted investments, but really reimagining some of the vacant commercial spaces and what that could mean and what it could look like. And some of the more promising things that have come forth is looking at focusing in around universities and what the power of bringing more students along the full educational continuum, really K through 12, all the way up to continuing education and graduate school programs, really thinking about how we create vibrant centers where we really lean into DC's value as being a center for education and discourse and free thought. And so that's been really promising. It could be something that has a direct impact on real estate, right? So we're talking about not just building centers for learning, but with that, you might need housing, you might need other amenities that help to make university district more prosperous. So there's some encouraging signs there that there could be some future uses in the ed space.
I think Darren is absolutely spot on with the universities. They have been I think a lot of folks don't realize that there are 22 universities within the District of Columbia proper and growing. And to Jaren's point, the Johns Hopkins space is absolutely amazing. As a matter of fact, the mayor held her cabinet meeting there last Wednesday. And before that opened, over the summer, the University of Southern California opened up a beautiful space just in the DuPont Circle area. So we're starting to see that universities want to be here. They want to be in Washington, D.C. for all the reasons that Councilman McDuffie mentioned earlier, the seat of the federal government, arts, entertainment, and all the rest of it. So we're, the education sector, I think, is one area that is growing, and we'll be able to fill the space, change the space, and bring the people downtown pursuant to the action plan.
Thank you. Councilman McDuffie, other than education and some of this conversion, do you have any other visions that you want to share about how to reuse some of our office space?
I really am leaving that to the folks who are the experts who work in this space. What I want them to do is tell me what the ideas are so we can figure out how to facilitate that activity. Yeah. We don't want to thwart any economic activity that would otherwise happen with these bold, new, innovative ideas. And so, no, I mean, what I'm doing is making sure that people understand that they have an ally in this office in the Wilson building to make sure that we are facilitating the type of economic activity that the cities need to see that growth. We want to attract more schools. I know we talked about Hopkins. I believe USC has a larger presence now in the District of Columbia. What more are we doing to make the case that universities who want to be able to communicate with the federal government, they want to go after those research dollars, they want to have a larger footprint in the District of Columbia, needs to do that now. And here's what it looks like when they do it. And so I think, Keith just gave some numbers in terms of how many universities have a presence in the District of Columbia. We know that the Atlantic 10 just moved their headquarters here to the District of Columbia. I love talking about sports because I know what it did for me in my life and my life's trajectory. We need to keep those assets that we have here, like Monumental, like Nats. We need to make sure we're facilitating $6 billion corporations that may want to locate here in the District of Columbia. And so, I think there are a lot of things that we can do to keep making the case that the nation's capital is the place to be if you want to do business.
So, Yeshua, I'm just going to get back to the title, which said, doing business under fiscal distress. So when you talked about the commercial valuations dropping, you also said, that the tax revenue will also drop. And that's going to, as federal aid drops, it's going to cause some stress on the city budget. So the numbers you have in the report are fairly dramatic. Do you want to just share with our audience a little bit about what that looks like? And then I want to turn to the panel and ask them what their recommendations are for action on that.
Thank you, Alex. This is something that's on our minds at the DC Policy Center. The pandemic had a tremendous impact on the district's economy and its tax base and its revenue structure. But to some extent, the city did not have to deal with that because we had a tremendous amount of fiscal aid coming from the federal government. All in all, the city received over $16 billion of federal fiscal aid, including direct supports to households, for example, in the form of child tax credit or increased unemployment benefits, direct supports to businesses in the form of paycheck protection programs and other types of aids. And the district itself received over nearly $5 billion of federal fiscal aid, and the schools on top of it received about $1 billion. So all of these things has helped the city not only preserve existing programs, but also grow and add. And those were important. Some of those programs were, for example, grants to the businesses that Councilmember McDuffie worked on and with the Deputy Mayor for Economic Development. Over 100 million, tremendous support. So, but by the end of this fiscal year in 2024, all these fiscal supports are coming to an end. At the same time, the city will be facing a weakened revenue picture, as we discussed, and then we'll have to solve the $750 million metro deficit problem. So all of these things are happening at the same time, which means this city, which is a city that's accustomed to plan for growth, will have to plan for something that's not growth, and that's going to be tremendously difficult.
Councilmember McDuffie, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the fiscal picture for the city?
Well, I mean, we got a revenue estimate that's going to be hitting soon, and I think Yasim has already described some of the things that we're going to see in that estimate. I think the fiscal picture is sobering, frankly, which is why it's so important for us to be able to focus on things that are going to help our city's growth, focus on things that are going to bring jobs to the District of Columbia, focus on things that's going to enhance the vibrancy of our downtown, really amplifying the things that are assets that are working. We know that tourism, hospitality, our restaurant scene are doing really solid in terms of our fiscal picture. I do get a little concerned about peeling back some of the layers though on that forecast in terms of what we're seeing in hospitality, tourism, restaurants. When I talk to the restaurant owners and operators, I hear concerns about inflation. I hear concerns about the cost. I hear concerns about things that are making it more expensive to do business in the District of Columbia, and frankly are lessening the margins that were already razor thin in some cases. And so we have to make sure that as we think about the overall financial picture, that we are really doing the things that keep businesses that are already here, give them a reason to stay, while we're also working feverishly to try to attract new businesses, because ultimately those revenues are going to drive our ability to keep that social safety net in place for the folks who are still struggling in our current economy. I'll also say, when we look at the overall economic picture, we see numbers like 5% unemployment. We have to recognize that we're still double-digit unemployment in places like Ward 8, right? So we're talking about the Commercial Property Acquisition Fund, which was mentioned earlier. I started that fund a few years ago, really to hone in on some of the Black, Hispanic entrepreneurs who are renting their properties and trying to create ways for them to increase their assets, to be able to buy their commercial properties. It's a really popular program, right? And they're doing that in places like Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. We have to sell that story. We have to make sure people understand what's happening over there, embrace the workers that are there who need the skills to be able to compete in this current economy. I think we're doing some of that. We have what's the name of the training center that's going to be over at Spingarn soon, that is really working with our utilities and others. The Infrastructure Academy.
DC Infrastructure Academy.
The Infrastructure Academy is what I'm talking about. That is really popular and is connecting with people across the District of Columbia, east of the river, bringing them to help them get the skills that they need to get quality jobs with career paths. And we need to make sure we're telling that story and embracing them so that they see themselves reflected in our current economy as well.
Yeah. Do you think the council, your colleagues on the council, would countenance any spending cuts in order to resolve some of these fiscal issues coming up?
I don't want to get out ahead of the forecast that we're going to get soon from the CFO. I don't know that we're there yet, but we should always be reviewing, our programs and our policies to make sure that we're getting the return on our investment. And then where a program isn't working, you should be thinking about whether it needs to continue to exist. We need to be driving programs that are driving our revenues in the right direction. And I think that's the bottom line. And so my colleagues, I think, are mindful of where we are as a local economy, and that, we got to do perhaps a little bit more belt tightening. I don't want to get out ahead of any one of my colleagues in terms of what their ideas might be to strengthen our economy, but we have to make sure that that we are talking to our business community as we're thinking about what policies are going to make our economy better. And I think in some years past, a lot of what was happening in the Wilson building was happening in silos. We need to make sure that we're not operating in silos and that we're communicating across lines, even where we don't necessarily agree. Because ultimately, what I think we all do agree about, Alex, is that we need to grow our local economy so that we can create more jobs and attract more people to the District of Columbia.
Right. Thank you. Angela, are there any concerns that you're hearing from the business community around the fiscal condition of the city going forward?
Yes, I mean, everything that we have talked about is a concern for the community. And that's why the DC Chamber is starting conversations with the CFO's office starting now so that we understand where we are and, you know, what we need to think of before budget is built. We agree with you, Councilmember McDuffie, and some of the other comments that council needs to be very mindful about how they're spending the money and not, you know, trying to put a little bit of the politics on the side and really doing what's right for the city and understanding what the priorities are. And I also think that we have to be intentional about hiring our small business community and giving opportunities to our small business community in terms of procurement and having the corporations that are here and the federal government that is here, you know, work with our small business community and be intentional about it.
Thank you.
Alex, I couldn't agree more with that statement. And just yesterday, along with the mayor and the council member, we celebrated a new anchor institution with the community, with CNHED, a program where we know that anchor institutions like our universities and our hospitals have almost a $2 billion spend per year. And we're making sure that our local small businesses have an opportunity to take advantage of some of those opportunities. And so through that program alone, now our small businesses are doing up to $250 million a year in business with these anchor institutions. So these are the opportunities. So when we talk about opportunities for small businesses, we have to be intentional about it. And here's a program that is very intentional about it. And, you know, with the mayor's vision and the support of Councilman McDuffie and the council, we're making headway on that. So we have to continue with programs like this to support our small business economy.
Yeah, I agree with you, Deputy Mayor. And I think there's a lot of need and we have to build upon that initiative. It's something that I've worked personally extensive on that. And I think it's a perfect way of helping our small business community grow.
So, Jaron, let me throw you a hot potato here, if you don't mind. You know, the Washington Post and the Business Journal have reported on some conversations between Monumental Sports and the city around potentially relocating the Capital One Arena out of Chinatown. How much of a loss would that be to the bid and to the city if they were to relocate? And what are this? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly asked the $1 million question here, right? And it would be a detrimental impact to the city. You know, even when I'm thinking about that last question where you said, you know, we know that tough fiscal times are ahead and, you know, not getting ahead of the CFO projections, we know that there are going to be some tough budget questions and challenges ahead of us. I think it's really important that as a city, we are being really strategic about leaning into those investments that are going to have a valuable return on investment, right? I can't think of a better example than the Capital One Arena. When you look at what it has meant historically and over the years for not just the downtown community, but for the city as a whole, just in gross tax revenues off of ticket sales and admission fares, you know, we're bringing in between $34 to $50 million annually alone, not to mention the benefits of the people coming from different parts of the region who are then frequenting the restaurants and supporting the area, or people who want to be closer into DC for that amenity. So there are so many positive benefits to that we have to be smart about making the investments to keep them here. I think I'm sorry, please.
So I would not want to be the deputy mayor when the Capital One Arena were to relocate. But Deputy Mayor, tell us, so what can you do right now and what are you doing right now to make relocation less attractive for Monumental?
So we have a sports unit here in Denpasar right now. And so we're looking at this holistically. Not only are we looking at Capital One Arena, we're looking at Nat Stadium, Audi Field, and the potential for a new home for the Commanders, quite frankly. And so we're studying the economic impacts, pros and cons of stadiums, and really digging in and understanding how to not only the impacts of the stadiums, but how to finance these stadiums moving forward. So this is something we are laser focused on. We understand the impact that losing Capital One Arena would have, and we want to make sure that we continue to do the best for our residents in the city, and especially downtown.
Councilmember, what the sense of your committee, of you and your colleagues, about what to do to keep Capital One Arena downtown?
Alex, you mentioned 1997 earlier.
Yes, I did.
I remember, I've been around long enough to remember what 1997 looked like in the District of Columbia.
Me too.
I remember 1987 downtown DC, which I went to infrequently because there was less things to do down there around that time. I remember what it meant when Abe Poland and Monumental opened the doors to the MCI Center all those years ago, and how it helped to transform that Gallery Place, Penn Quarter, Chinatown area. And I know what Nat Stadium has meant for the area around, Capitol Riverfront and the Navy Yard. I know what Audi Field has meant for the area around Southwest. And so we need to do whatever we need to do within our financial abilities as a city to keep monumental sports here in the nation's capital, period, full stop. Because the benefits accrue to the city in so many ways. Obviously our bottom line, but also in the vibrancy when it comes to our hospitality, tourism, sports, entertainment economy in the District of Columbia. And so there are a lot of folks who are employed there. I think there should be some conversations about what it means to have those workers who are there for the period where there are sports activities that are going on, there are entertainment activities going on that are also, people who are employed in another season at another stadium. How do we work to make sure that that employment is sustained throughout the course of a year, maybe with greater benefits? Those are the conversations that I want to have. How do we enhance and do more of what Monumental has been able to do for the last several decades? But having them leave is just simply shouldn't be an option for anybody who's in a position like mine.
Thank you. Yashim, do you have any sense of what the financial implications would be, of what would actually work, what the city should do to keep Monumental here?
The general approach to investments like this is really focusing on the future revenue growth. We've financed stadiums and big investments like this through a mechanism called tax increment financing, comparing what the future tax revenue might look like with the new development to what the baseline trajectory is. So the fiscal argument for this is this investment brings, the city may experience the same type of growth, but over much longer periods of time. The idea is to bring that kind of growth earlier into the city, so the city can benefit from it sooner. In some cases, this is desperately needed for the District of Columbia right now, because what we need now is economic growth.
Thank you. Angela, I'm going to give you the last word on this particular topic, and I know we're coming to the end of our session here.
I mean, I think everybody kind of gave a great picture of what can happen. I also think we need to think about the impact to the small business community there, and what's going to happen with the small businesses around, and it's something that we always have to take that into consideration as well.
Well, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the panel, each of you, for a really robust conversation. Doing business under financial distress it's a challenging few years we've got, but your optimism is really very contagious, and I really appreciate all the thinking that you're doing into it. And I know our audience and the residents of the city and the region appreciate it as well. So thank you all very much. Angela, thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much
Alex.
for your participation. Thank you.